Look at the skyline of any major American city, or the center of any rural town, and you will see the architecture of permanence, massive stone facades, towering steeples, sprawling modern campuses. The public is conditioned to view these structures as fixed entities immune to the gravitational pull of market economics. But an institution is not a building. It is a supply chain. It requires a constant, predictable influx of raw materials, processing, and output. It requires factories to mold the next generation of management, and right now, the factories are going dark. According to a sweeping 2017 study published by the Barna Group, the American church is sitting on a demographic time bomb. In 1992, the median age of a Protestant clergyman in the United States was 44 years old. Today, that average age has climbed to 54. To understand the sheer scale of this shift, you have to look at the extremes of the data. Over the last 3 decades, the percentage of institutional leaders aged 65 and older has nearly tripled. There are now more full-time senior pastors over the age of 65 than there are under the age of 40. This is not a spiritual transition. This is a human resources catastrophe. The workforce is physically aging out, and the replacements simply do not exist. Data from the North American Division of Seventh-day Adventists reveals that of their current 4,300 pastors, approximately 2,500 will reach retirement age within the next 10 years. The Lutheran Church Missouri Synod projects that over the next 15 years, their number of ordained ministers could drop by 50%, plummeting from roughly 6,000 down to 3,000. Already nearly 20% of their congregations sit completely vacant. The masses shifting through the pews each weekend assume the system will provide. They assume that when the current leader retires, a younger, highly educated replacement will seamlessly step into the void to maintain the continuity of the brand. But the data reveals a terrifying asymmetry. To understand the breakdown, we have to examine the manufacturing floor. For decades, the gold standard of pastoral formation has been the Master of Divinity, a grueling 3-year graduate program required for ordination in most traditional denominations. But according to the Association of Theological Schools, or ATS, the primary accrediting body for seminaries in North America, the bottom has fallen out of this market. Peak enrollment for the Master of Divinity occurred in 2006, with just under 35,000 students nationwide. By 2017, that number had contracted to about 28,400. The most recent ATS projections for the fall of 2022 show enrollment stagnating at 28,000, representing a 9% decline since just 2018. A decade ago, Master of Divinity students made up 43% of all theological enrollment. Today, they account for only 35%. The implosion is most visible within the mainline Protestant traditions. ATS data tracking the years 2000 to 2020 exposes a devastating 47% decline in enrollments across mainline denominations, plunging from over 9,000 students down to fewer than 5,000. The Presbyterian Church USA and the American Baptist churches both watched their enrollments plummet by over 58% in that exact same 20-year window. When the supply of raw material vanishes, the processing plants can no longer sustain their overhead. The physical architecture of formation is currently being liquidated. Consider Christ the King Seminary in Buffalo, New York. Founded in the 19th century, it operated on a sprawling campus designed to turn out generations of Catholic priests. But by 2019, the seminary was operating at roughly 10% of its capacity. It reported a total headcount of just 55 students, with only 26 men actually preparing for the priesthood. Running a persistent annual operating deficit in excess of $500,000, the institutional math collapsed. In 2020, the diocese voted to shut the factory down. In early 2025, the massive, vacant architecture of the former seminary was auctioned off through bankruptcy court, sold for $4,200,000 to an entirely different organization. This is not an isolated event. It is a systemic retraction. In 2016, Golden Gate Baptist Theological Seminary permanently locked the doors of its main campus in California. In Texas, Hardin-Simmons University voted to completely shut down Logsdon Seminary due to falling enrollments and decreased funding. On July 1, 2024, The historic New York Theological Seminary in Manhattan, established over a century ago, officially closed its doors. The corporate footprint of theological education is shrinking. The physical assets are being sold off. The reason for this structural death spiral becomes glaringly obvious when you run the financial autopsy on the students themselves. We are conditioned to view religious leadership through the lens of calling and sacrifice. But the system operates in a ruthless market economy. Becoming a pastor requires a massive upfront capital investment, usually funded by federal student loans. And the return on that investment is mathematically unviable. According to research from the Association of Theological Schools and the Lilly Endowment, the economic burden placed on future ministers has reached crisis levels. In 2020, ATS reported that the average educational debt incurred just during seminary was $33,537. When you combine that with undergraduate loans, borrowers bring an estimated average of $37,300 in pre-existing educational debt with them the moment they walk through the seminary doors. In total, a significant percentage of graduates are exiting these factories carrying $50,000 to $60,000 in compounded debt. This financial weight exposes deep sociological fractures. According to a 2021 ATS report on Black student debt, 65% of Black graduates leave seminary carrying educational debt, compared to 39% overall. Furthermore, Black borrowers graduate with an average debt of $42,500, roughly $10,000 higher than the overall average. An earlier ATS study found that 82% of Black non-Hispanic students incurred new educational debt during their theological training, with averages soaring above $46,000. Female students are also statistically more likely to borrow than their male counterparts, taking on significantly higher average loan amounts. In a functioning corporate supply chain, high educational debt is offset by high starting salaries. Law students and medical students borrow heavily because the market compensates them upon graduation. The church does not. According to data aggregating United States salaries, an entry-level pastor with less than 3 years of experience can expect a starting salary of roughly $35,200. Even as they progress, a mid-level pastor earns an average of $42,350. The Bureau of Labor Statistics notes that 50% of pastors make less than $49,120 annually, and the bottom 10% earn less than $30,050. A memorial resolution drafted by the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America in 2019 bluntly outlined the crisis, stating that less than 10% of graduates receive denominational help for loan repayment, while 70% of their graduates pull starting salaries of less than $30,000. The economic reality is absolute. Entering pastoral ministry causes an immediate and sustained drop in wages. Financial planners analyzing this space have noted that the debt-to-income ratio for most ministers is worse than 1-to-1 the moment they graduate. The supply chain is collapsing because the business model is a trap. The factories are charging a premium for a degree that funnels the graduate into a low-paying, highly demanding institutional role. The sheer volume of the debt effectively acts as a deterrent, repelling the next generation from ever entering the pipeline. When the factories close and the raw materials refuse to enter a mathematically broken system, the final stage is the slow death of the retail outlets. Look at the output numbers. In 2013, the United Church of Christ ordained 177 new ministers. A decade later, in 2023, that number plummeted to 80. That is a 55% decline in ordinations in just 10 years. Sociologists projecting this trend note that within 5 to 7 years, there will be more retired ministers in that denomination than active ones. The Presbyterian Church in America recently estimated they need 220 new ministers annually just to meet their current baselines. But the combined output of all their affiliated Reformed seminaries in a recent year was only about 180 graduates. The math is bleeding out. They are simply not producing enough units to replace the units that are expiring. There is also a profound spatial disconnect between the leaders who do graduate and the buildings that need them. A 2021 study by the Sociology Department at Duke University laid bare the structural mismatch of the American congregation. The data shows that the vast majority of seminarians originate from large, well-funded churches, but the vast majority of available jobs are in small, struggling churches. 70% of all full-time ministerial staff are employed by congregations with fewer than 360 people. These small outposts, the rural chapels, and the aging suburban sanctuaries have an average annual operating budget of just $200,000 to $250,000. They survive entirely on the localized capital of aging populations. They do not have the financial liquidity to offer a $60,000 salary, let alone health benefits or pension contributions, to a newly minted graduate drowning in federal loans. Because the local parishes cannot afford the product and the students cannot afford the debt, the mechanism locks up. As a result, denominations are increasingly forced into desperate logistical maneuvers, stripping healthy congregations of their leadership to plug holes in dying parishes. This creates a cascading instability across the entire network. This is the hidden crisis masked by the stained glass and the Sunday routines. The institution has been hollowed out. The men and women currently keeping the lights on are hurtling toward retirement. The seminaries built to replace them are consolidating, selling off their physical assets and abandoning their core degrees. The few young leaders brave enough to enter the machine are instantly crushed by an insurmountable matrix of educational debt and sub-poverty wages. The numbers are absolute. The supply chain has fractured. We are watching the quiet, highly predictable liquidation of a massive societal infrastructure. When the current generation finally steps down and this vast network of physical buildings requires new management to open the doors, who exactly will be left to turn the key?